Let's go back to the winter of 1959. We're in the remote northern Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union. And there, 9 of the country's most experienced hikers are making their final camp on this desolate, frozen slope. Now, these weren't amateurs. They had faced conditions just like this dozens of times. But by morning, they were gone.
So what happened up there? Well, what a search party found weeks later has baffled investigators for over 60 years now. The incident took place on a mountain the local Mansi people have a name for. They call it Kholat Syakhl. In their language, that means dead mountain. And it remains one of history's most chilling and deeply unsolved mysteries.
Okay, so to even begin to understand the theories, we have to start at the beginning. We have to understand the scene itself, because what the search party found up there, it just defies any simple explanation. It was a place of complete contradictions, of quiet horror, and of questions that, well, they just don't make any logical sense.
The very first clue was their tent, their only shelter, and it had been slashed open. But here's the thing. It wasn't torn by an animal or ripped by the wind. No, it was sliced open with a knife from the inside. They had cut their own way out. Now, why would they do that?
And they fled into this, minus 40 degrees Celsius, a night so cold it could literally kill you in minutes. They left their coats, they left their boots, their supplies. They fled, some in just their socks, some completely barefoot, into that brutal, unforgiving darkness.
But the bodies, when they were finally found, they told a much, much more violent story. We're talking catastrophic internal injuries, ribs and skulls just shattered by some immense, almost inhuman force. And yet, get this, there wasn't a single scratch on their skin.
And if you think that's strange, the scene held even darker secrets. One of the women, Lyudmila Dubina, she was found without her tongue. 2 of the other hikers were missing their eyes. And on top of all that, several pieces of their clothing tested positive for radiation, significant levels of it. Every new fact just made the mystery deeper. You have to understand, these weren't just some weekend campers who got lost in a storm. No, this was not a group of novices. These were seasoned experts, students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. They were on an expedition with the highest possible difficulty rating. They knew the wilderness, they absolutely knew the risks. So their journey starts on January 23rd, and there were 10 of them originally. But just a few days in, on the 28th, one of them, Yuri Yudin, had to turn back. He'd gotten sick. It was just a simple twist of fate, but it saved his life, and it haunted him for the rest of it. The other 9, well, they pressed on, and they made their final camp on February 1st.
The leader of the group was Igor Dyatlov, just 23 years old, but he was brilliant, meticulous, a true veteran of Russia's harshest terrain. But then there was this outlier in the group, Semyon Zolotarev. He was 38, a decorated World War II veteran, and he had mysteriously, specifically asked to join this particular student expedition. Why? We still don't know.
Okay, let's go back to the scene itself, because the more the investigators looked, the less sense any of it made. The evidence wasn't pointing to a single clear event. It was pointing to a series of impossibilities.
Think about this. The footprints leading away from that slashed open tent. They weren't the chaotic tracks of people scrambling in terror. No, they were measured, orderly. The tracks suggest the group actually walked calmly, downhill, maybe even single file, right into that frozen wasteland.
Now, the first 5 bodies they found, well, their cause of death seemed tragically straightforward. They had died of hypothermia. They froze to death. 2 were found under a large cedar tree, their hands just shredded from trying to climb it. 3 others were found frozen in these poses that suggest they were desperately trying to get back to the tent. A horrible but understandable end.
But it wasn't the end of the story, because it was the discovery of the last 4 hikers, 2 months later, buried under 4 meters of snow in a ravine. That discovery changed everything. These 4, they did not die from the cold. The official coroner's report, it's chilling to read. The internal trauma was just immense. He compared the force needed to cause these injuries to a high-speed car crash. But remember, there was no external bruising, no soft tissue damage. It was as if they had been crushed by some invisible, massive pressure. Unsurprisingly, the Soviet investigation was closed very quickly. The files were sealed for 30 years. And the official cause of death? It was listed simply and so cryptically as an unknown compelling force.
So, what was that force? In the decades since, dozens of theories have popped up, all trying to explain it. They try to piece together the radiation, the bizarre injuries, the strange behavior, but the truth is, not a single one of them can account for everything. So, let's just walk through the big ones, right? First, you have the slab avalanche theory. This could explain the crushing injuries and why they had to cut their way out of the tent in a hurry. Makes sense. But investigators on the scene said the slope was way too shallow for that, and there were no other signs of an avalanche. Okay, so what about a secret military test? That would explain the radiation, those orange spheres people reported seeing in the sky, and why the files were sealed so fast. But there are zero records of any such test, and it doesn't really explain those very specific, internal-only injuries. Then there are katabatic winds. These are incredibly powerful, freezing blasts of air that can plummet down a mountain, making a terrifying sound. This might explain why they fled the tent, but again, it doesn't explain the radiation or the sheer force that crushed their bodies. You see the problem here? Each theory solves one little piece of the puzzle, but leaves all the others just sitting on the table.
And so, the mystery just endures. It's not because people haven't investigated it, it's because the facts themselves, they just refuse to fit into any logical story. The truth, it seems, is buried under the very same snow that covered the victims.
Fast forward to 2020, Russian authorities actually reopened the case, and they offered a final, official conclusion: a small-scale avalanche. Case closed. That's it. But for so many others, for the families, for the investigators who have spent their lives on this, that simple explanation just isn't nearly enough.
Because the core facts remain, and they are just as inexplicable today as they were back in 1959. 1. 9 experts cut their way out of a perfectly good tent. 2. They walked calmly into -40-degree darkness. 3. They were barefoot. And 4. One by one, they died from exposure and from massive internal trauma that no single theory can explain.
And what about Yuri Yudin, the 10th hiker, the sole survivor? He lived all the way until 2013. For 54 years, he carried that impossible weight of survival, and he went to his grave believing that the true story of what happened to his friends was deliberately hidden from the world.
So what was it? What was that unknown, compelling force that drove 9 people from their only shelter out into a fatal, freezing night? Was it an act of nature, a military secret, or was it something else entirely? The Ural Mountains, they don't give up their secrets easily, and Dead Mountain may just keep this one forever.